All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, whatever time zone you may be in. I'm Chris Williams with System 6, and Jeremy Allen is joining us today as well. A quick thank you to Michael and the team for having us. System 6, we're a cloud accounting firm doing everything from frontline bookkeeping and accounting services through payroll, through bill pay, all the way up through CFO advisory and controllership services. We're about 150 clients today, $3 million. We'll get into it more further, but I want Jeremy to introduce himself now.
That's great. Hey, Chris, thank you. It's great to be here today. It's clearly sunny outside, which where I am in West Michigan is a treat. Even though it's like 30 degrees, it's still sunny. So it's awesome. Excited and honored to be here today and share our experience with this virtual summit, a fine group of listeners and participants. Haven't been on 2 previous podcasts with Michael. It's an honor to be invited back. So thanks for having us. I also want to say thanks for investing your time to listen in and hopefully some of the ideas that we share give you real value. A mentor of mine named Jim Rohn used to start his talks and seminars by saying that he hoped that the folks who came would receive 3 times, 5 times, 10 times the value for whatever they paid to come to the talk. And I truly hope the same for you, that the principles and ideas that Chris and I share today and that all the panelists share, all the speakers share, are helpful to you as you continue your own journey towards your own definition of success. I'm Jeremy Allen. I founded System 6 Bookkeeping 13 years ago. The goal of helping small businesses succeed by providing the best in bookkeeping and accounting support that we could provide. And since being a startup at the kitchen table in Seattle, we've grown to $3 million in annual revenue, 20 plus team members around the country, 150 clients. And then recently, this summer, sold and transitioned the business to Chris, who we'll talk a little bit more about that, and extremely grateful and thankful for that. Now I get a chance to be even more present with my beautiful wife, Rachel, and my 3 girls, Abby, Junebug, and Etta, who are now 3, 5, and 7. So hopefully on the talk today, Chris and I will get a chance to share perspectives of, my perspective of how we built the business, but also the perspective of going through the transition process. And now Chris taking the business from 3 million to 5 and to 10 million. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself some more?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to our time together. Like I said, thank you, Michael and team, for having Jeremy and I, and especially that this is an exciting transition time for System 6. So we're glad to be here, and we will talk a little bit about that throughout today. I also want to thank you for being here. I know you're busy. Year end is coming. It's not quite January, but it's here. Start getting those 1099s together. So thank you for taking time to be with us. And I want to say also just a thank you to all of you for who you are in this industry. The time I've spent here, I've been really impressed with how open, how collaborative everyone is, from podcasts to face-to-face conversations I've had at conferences. It's been a real pleasure getting to know some of you, and I'm looking forward to continuing to do that. A little bit more about me. Before System 6, I spent my career in various roles throughout the finance ecosystem. I worked as an analyst in an investment bank. I spent time working in investing directly at a private equity firm. I've spent time in FP&A roles in real estate and software companies. Spent some time at business school getting my MBA. And now I'm here at System 6, bringing all of my experience to bear for us as we continue to grow, and also for our clients as they go through growth, as they sometimes go through M&A transitions. So that's me and my background. I live in California with a beautiful partner, Blair, and we love spending time outside when we get to be outside. We're glad it's not 35. We do love the sun. And look, in our short time together today, we want to make sure we do give you immediate, clear, actionable ideas to help you as a business owner, and help you become a leader in your, accounting practice, whatever it may look like. So with that, I'll let Jeremy give a little more history on how System 6 got to where it is.
That's great. And what I'd say here is brief history, 13 years building System 6 from startup, kitchen table to a $3 million business. There's a lot. I was thinking about this last night, that's kind of like preschool to graduating high school, right? There's a ton that has been learned and scraped our knees along the way and have graduated, if you will, to kind of the next level of maturity as a company. So sparing everyone like a lengthy and potentially boring walk down my memory lane, which I could do, it's probably more effective to say, go listen to episode 67 and episode 234 of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. Michael is a great podcast host. He listens, he asks great questions, and he's done a really good job of pulling out and highlighting some of the best and most relevant parts, I think, of the System 6 journey, my own journey this past 13 years. For those that don't want to go back and haven't listened to those, podcasts where a 13-year-old business started at the kitchen table in Seattle, had a very part-time employee who, by the way, is still with the company, Kelly, and she's now the managing director. I'm so proud of her for the way she's grown from someone in college learning bookkeeping with the company now to leading and keeping the culture and helping guide a $3 million business. Over the past course of these 13 years, we have gone from startup to 3 million, most of which is recurring revenue. We bill our clients weekly. We provide, as Chris said, some hourly and some cleanup and some consulting and some CFO and controllership. And that's grown us into a team of more than 20, scattered across the country in 12 different states, Hawaii to Florida. And earlier this summer, we transitioned ownership from myself, having started System 6 13 years ago, transitioned it from myself to Chris. Our leadership team was intimately involved in that process and got a chance to meet and vet and agree that Chris was the right guy to help take us to that next level of 5 million and 10 million and beyond. And so that's enough history. You can listen to more if you want, and let's jump into our presentation. And what we want to focus on today are 3 main pillars of strategy, people, and execution. In building System 6, as I said, there's a ton we've learned, but I feel like strategy, people, and execution is 3 pillars or buckets is a great way to think about the main things that have taken us from startup to a very successful business. And so think strategy, people, execution. Think about it like 3 legs of a stool. What I do want to say is there's a lot of credit to be given. There's a lot of folks to thank. EO and the EO Accelerator Process, Entrepreneurs Organization, Vern Harnish and Scaling Up, the Traction EOS Entrepreneurial Operating System. Like there's so many books and ideas and conferences and seminars and workshops that have probably amalgamated to make System 6 the success that we are. So just want to say thank you to all the people, all the organizations, all the content, all the writers. Those ideas have helped us distill the strategy, people, and execution for ourselves.
Yeah. And I think, Jeremy just sort of previewed it there a little bit. There's a ton more out there. There's, all these books have a lot more detail in them. And we recognize that, and we'll give a little preview of other stuff out there. But the point is today, we did want to make sure you got a focus list of actionable takeaways. We don't want to just be throwing stuff all over the place. So that's why we decided to focus on 3 things and what we find to be the 3 most actionable items: strategy, people, execution. You do those well, I'm very confident your business will continue to grow and scale the way you want to. So let's jump into strategy, Jeremy.
That's good. So here's the big idea, the TLDR of this whole section on strategy. We all need a North Star to follow. And having a compelling mission, vision, and core values, well, that's what we believe is that North Star. That's the foundation for building a successful business. Here, I'll give you a quick story. When we were starting System 6 in the earliest days, less than $100,000 of revenue, a very close friend of mine, Jordan Van Horn, he and I went to an EO, Entrepreneurs Organization talk that was open to the general business community. Not doing $100,000 a year, really small, sitting around the table with other business owners, some of which were doing $1 million, $2 million, $3 million a year in revenue or more. And they're throwing out terms like EBITDA and gross margin and Chris, all these things. I was like, gosh, this sounds awesome. I'm really glad to be at the table. I don't know half of what they're talking about, but as I sat and learned that day and we listened, a guy named Mark Moses gave a talk. And one of the biggest takeaways Jordan and I got that day was every great company has a written mission, vision, and set of core values. Not every company has them, but every great company does. And so Jordan and I looked at each other and, we just spent the day, took tons of notes. And as we had coffee the next day, we're like, gosh, we have this vision in our heads and our hearts of this company we want to build, but we hadn't written all that mission, vision, values down, didn't really know to do it. And we thought, well, how are we going to attract folks, clients, and team to this vision that we had if it wasn't even written down, if it wasn't really crystallized? And so we walked away from that day-long workshop with the instruction, go create a mission, vision, and value.
Yeah. And that's takeaway number one here, right? You need to have it. Every successful business does. If you don't have it today, that's okay. It can also evolve. Our mission statement has evolved over time. We'll go into that in a little bit of detail later. But the point is, you need to have it. So if you don't have it, it's time to go sit down and think through it, really chew on it. You don't just hammer this out in 20 minutes, on Teams with one of your clients. So
That's right.
be thoughtful. And Jeremy, maybe you talk about how tactically you went about doing that.
Yeah. And so we went to the workshop. We had coffee the next day in the office, which the office was right, the kitchen table in our apartment. And I said, hey, like, we got to do this. What is the process? Is there a book? Is there a template to follow? And so we booked a cabin outside Seattle in the Cascades. We packed up. Jordan did a great job of creating a little agenda for us. And we got to the cabin, unpacked, cooked a great dinner, poured a glass of scotch. And we sat down by the fire and we started looking at Coca-Cola and Microsoft and Google and Apple and said, hey, what are their vision, mission, and values? A lot of that stuff you can find on their website at the time and in Wikipedia. And so we looked for inspiration. We looked for guidance. How does a mission, vision, and core values, how do they look from other companies? And so after looking through dozens of examples, we realized that they all helped answer questions like, what do we stand for? What do we want to be known for? Why would someone want to come work with our team versus someone else's team? So, which we'll come to that point in just a minute. So by the end of the evening, we had this framework written out: mission, vision, core values. Over the weekend, we further refined them. We talked, we walked, we hiked, we ate, we got some exercise, and we really started to get some meat on the bones of our mission, our vision, and our values. And, here's one of the core values we created that weekend, and it was culture. We create a positive and lasting culture that attracts, retains, and rewards our employees, our clients, our vendors, and our community. We treat others the way we want to be treated. And that cultural core value has lasted from then until now. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. And that's absolutely right. It's a critical thing, not just to have these in your mind, but to really write them down. And that you're not done there. It's great to go on the retreat and have fun while you write them down and walk out with a really shiny one piece of paper, but you need to carry them forward consistently. So for us at System 6, every month we have an all hands team meeting and we talk about quickly each of our core values. We show our mission statement, we read it out loud, and then we actually dive deep into one core value, not all 6. We don't want to bore people, but we talk about that one core value and we call out team members who did a great job of living out that core value in that last month. So you need to consistently be refreshing and reminding yourself and your team of what the core values are. And that's how it permeates throughout the organization over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. And that's, for us in the beginning, we had the core values, we had our mission, we had our vision. And then one of the instructions that we took away from that workshop was, well, describe that, write that out. What does a positive and lasting culture look like? What attracts, retains, and rewards our employees, our clients, our vendors, and our community? And we came up with, and still have it. It was really rewarding to find it this summer and read through it as we were transitioning together, Chris, of, hey, like, we wanted everyone to have a great laptop, sit-stand desks, which, 13 years ago was kind of new and kind of a new idea. We wanted everyone to have fast internet, a really great laptop, an espresso machine in the office, some really tangible stuff like health insurance, retirement, profit sharing, employee ownership, flexible work schedules, work as little or as much as you need. Those were all ideas that, as we wrote them out, we said, this is what culture looks like, or this is what excellence looks like. This is what it means to be generous in the community with the profits that we made. And so as we wrote those out and put meat on them, it was amazing to come back from the weekend on the mountaintop. And now we've got our mission, vision, values, and we came back to the office, and that's a bit of where reality hit us is, okay, now we have this North Star, we have this mission, vision, values, there's meat that we've put on the bone, but we're still this tiny business that we need to grow. We need to go get clients. We need to add team. And so that's where we can move on here from strategy and mission, vision, values, right? Yeah. We realized those were important things. And then what?
Yeah. Yeah. And before we jump on, there is one thing I want to reiterate there. And Jeremy, hinted at it without calling it out, is the power of having mission, vision, values is it guides you in every decision you make. We have flexible, joyful as words in our mission statement for the work environment we're trying to provide. And that's why we got a standing desk 10 years ago. Like, that level of detail is not in your mission statement, but it it guides every decision you make. And there's a lot of value in that, especially as you think about the long-term resiliency. There's the first time we use that word, which is our topic today, of your business, is you're bringing a consistent decision-making capability to every decision you make. And as your team learns that mission, vision, values, they use that. They're making decisions every day. And then as a business owner, you can feel really good about having consistent decision-making across your enterprise. That's how you create durability and ultimately, real value if you're ever in Jeremy's position and wanting to transition out of the business. Before we jump into people, I want to say, there are a couple other strategic calls out there we haven't talked about. Pricing, sales and marketing. What kind of customer do you want? Things that are worth spending time on. But when it comes to strategy, you got to start first with mission, vision, values, have it. But, you can't stop there. It's great to have it. Who's actually going to live it out? So Jeremy, why don't you talk a little bit about people and your vision there and how it started?
Yeah. So we'll move from strategy with mission, vision, values, that foundation, that underneath the house that we're building, and then move on to the second pillar, which is people. We've done a good job of communicating mission, vision, value, create your North Star, put as much detail as possible on what those core values look like when they're lived out, so that moving on, it attracts and retains great team. We can't build a successful, long-term, profitable business or enterprise without a team. Can't go play professional sports. I guess there's golf, but like soccer, football, baseball, it takes a team, right, to make that game happen. And so early on in System 6, when we were thinking about names and thinking about where we were going, we decided against naming it, Allen and Associates, or nothing's wrong if that's what you've chosen to name your firm after yourself, but realize that this was going to be a team affair. This was going to be something that as we built System 6, it would take more than just one or two individuals. And so in today's hyper competitive, the great reshuffling of the workforce that we're seeing with COVID, we're finding that attracting and retaining team is more important than ever. And we're a people business. We're a service-based business, not a robot or technology. Like, we're, at the end of the day, it's still people providing high caliber bookkeeping, accounting, and controllership services and those relationships. And so people is the second, important leg. And, a couple of maybe quick phrases that I've learned to internalize over the years is Pastor Dave Kraft, mentor and friend of mine. He says, "Hey, Jeremy, you can tell if you're leading or not by simply looking behind you. If no one is following you, you're going on a walk. You're not leading anyone towards a vision or a goal." And so I think about our mission, vision, values, and are they attractive? Do they, when I turn around, are people finding that inspiring, attractive, sticky, and are they willing to come along the journey towards the vision of creating a multi-million-dollar profitable bookkeeping and accounting firm? And by a lot of God's grace and hard work and good luck, they have been, and we've created, a really successful business. So it takes that committed thinking and visioneering to build the mission, vision, value, but without people, we can't actually execute it, which we'll talk about execution in a minute. So the big takeaway here is one of our most important jobs is attracting and retaining an outstanding team and being a keeper of the culture. We need to, as leaders, attract and retain great team and keep a great culture. Yeah. So, Chris,
we'll get into the ticky tack of how do you attract and how do you retain, but that word came up. We all hear it all the time. Culture. It's, sometimes a little hard to really nail down, but I think it is really important when you talk about people to also talk about culture, because if you don't have a good culture, even if you get great people in the door, and I'm willing to bet you might not be able to, because, people understand what culture is from afar. If you get them in, they're not going to stay. So, to define culture, so we can talk about it through our conversation on people, it's really, how does your team experience the place that they work? Are they stressed or are they frazzled? Are their coworkers helpful and inclusive? Is there kind of a cutthroat environment? Does your business accommodate the growth or the work-life balance that they want? So, as you're thinking about team, how to get great people, you also have to make sure you have the environment that they want to be in. That's culture. And, part of it's kind of all circular. So you have to be aware of that. But to get that environment, you also need to get great people in the door. So let's know we have to create a great environment, but also we have to get the people first who will create it. So Jeremy, why don't you talk a little bit about how you've hired over the years?
Yeah, it's fun to look back and realize that we created this mission, vision, values. We early on, hey, this is where we want to go. We want to build a successful multi-million dollar profitable bookkeeping and accounting practice. And we wanted to have an amazing team to help live that out. And so early on, we didn't use Indeed or job postings, or it was all by word of mouth. And so it was, and I'm sure in talking with other, folks in the industry, this is kind of how it starts. Like, who do we know from our kids' little league or school or church or volunteer organizations, nonprofits? Like, start telling that mission, vision, value, start telling that story. Where are we going? And then folks say, well, gosh, that sounds really attractive. I'd like to come along with that. So our early days were, Kelly came from a community group at church. A friend introduced us. Several other of our long-standing team who are still with us came from various friend groups, church groups, nonprofit groups in Seattle, and super thankful for that. But as we said earlier, like there were some real hiring mistakes in the process of like, well, gosh, we found great folks that we could trust, that we liked, but they didn't know a lot about accounting. They didn't know a lot about QuickBooks or cloud bookkeeping, and so we early on, that friends and family network served us really well, but it also led to a lot of kind of like stumbling over ourselves and mishiring, if you would, and then having to have the awkward conversation of, oh, I'm sorry, not actually the right fit.
So I'm sure, it sounds like you made some mistakes early on, and we'll talk about learnings from there. But also there were things I think that worked early in hiring that System 6 still does today. And that's sharing the mission, vision, values as part of finding teams. So what did that look like in the early days?
It's really similar now to how it was then. Like, we led with, hey, here's where we're going. And I think Jim Collins and all of his great business books talks about getting the right people in the right seats on your bus. And so we shared, hey, this is where we're going. We're looking for the right people to help us get there. And that guiding, sharing our North Star, our MVV, and then asking people if that aligns for them, that resonates for them, if they want to join us. That was the same with friends and family. And it's still the same now as we cast a national net. So I again, and that's one of the things we're talking about today, really critical to our success is we've had here's where we're going. Here's the team we want to become. Here's the excellent service we want to provide. And that has, whether it's friends and family or national ads, that has attracted some really high caliber team to System 6.
Yeah. And that's absolutely, it is still playing out that way today. We've hired, like I said, 3 people in the last 6 weeks. And, when I get on the phone with them at the end of the hiring process, it's not, hey, we were attracted to System 6 because you're paying an extra $1 an hour or two. It's because I read your mission statement on your website, or I saw the values written on the job posting, and I'm really excited about working at a place that cares about its team like that. So that, really is core. You got to have your mission, vision, values as part of your hiring process so that people know the culture they're stepping into. But there's also mistakes. There's things not to do. Certainly we're not doing everything perfectly, and we haven't.
No.
So what were some of those mistakes you made early on, Jeremy?
Gosh, what one that stands out is we took people's word for a lot, which is, hey, trust if they say they can do, they can do. And then, we get to the work on, oh, maybe they don't quite know how to, navigate QuickBooks like they said they did, or do a reconciliation or payroll journal entry. So one of the things that two things that come to mind actually that we got really good at was, one, in our job postings, we would bury this little statement like, hey, our favorite color is X. And if you are applying for this, be sure to send an email to such and such email address and tell us your favorite color. Tell us our favorite color rather, and then we'll process your application. And shocked, early days, all the way up to a more, we now use an applicant tracking system and Recruiter Box and TrackStar. And it, even though we've grown in complexity and maturity, people still miss that question. Half of the candidates don't even take the time to, and then secondly, QuickBooks shadowing or just job shadowing. We finally got to a place where we realize a take-home test or an application or a multiple choice, on an application isn't the same as getting on a Zoom call together and saying, hey, thanks for taking time with me. Let's go through some problems together. Let's do a recon. Let's do a payroll journal entry. Let's fix some things on the balance sheet or the P&L that aren't in the right place or don't look quite right. And just that shadowing and doing the work together has allowed us to see how people respond and do they really know how to navigate and get to a solution and how does their problem solving work. So there's a lot more, right, that we've learned and matured in, but those two things, as we've done them, have helped us really grow in our hiring process.
And, one thing we're leaning into now, but I think also is a great resource, no matter what size you are, is we have an outsourced hiring person that starts our process. So they manage the initial resume screens and they're looking at clients across a lot of applications for a lot of different businesses. So they've got a really good sense of who's a great fit, who we should accelerate, and who's maybe the resume isn't really what they said. So that's been great leverage for us because we don't have the time to review the hundreds of resumes we get, every couple of weeks. But you can absolutely, just like people use us to outsource
some filters,
their accounting, use somebody to help do your front line. We've talked about people, we've talked about getting people in the door, having a great culture to get them in the door. It's important to say you can't stop there. So hiring is step one. A couple of quick things here. You've also got to onboard people well. You got to give them a chance to
consistently
succeed. So have a repeatable day one process so it's organized. There's nothing worse for someone than to show up on day one and not have a login ready for them or not have a computer. You use recorded videos, Zoom or Loom, whatever tool you want to use, so that someone gets the same message every day on how to get set up, how to understand some of the processes at your company, and slowly build up their work. Don't, overwhelm them day one because they won't have a chance to succeed. They won't be doing a great job. They won't feel good about that. And even once you've onboarded and given them a chance, you need to be intentional about retention. So foster connectivity among your team. We have fun little events that we run on Microsoft Teams, like Halloween photo contest, which was great to see all the different contests a couple of weeks ago. Give people the chance to train and to learn more if they want to take on more skills. When people have the chance to grow and they see a path forward, they're going to want to stay with you both through the good times and,
and the challenging times
like COVID. At the end of the day, just remember your team members, they're people. Treat them as people, not as resources. Jeremy talked about this earlier, but ultimately it's our responsibility as leaders to make sure team members have the job they want, get them in the seat they want to be in. I call it job nirvana. Some want fast-paced growth. They want more hours. Others don't. They want their 25, and that's great because they've got a different season of life. So it's your job to listen, understand those preferences, and then provide them the role they're looking for. So,
and Chris, I would offer there, and really seeing in 13 years, that is a theme on the retaining part of attract and retain great people that, we've had some of our team over the years say, I need to work less. And instead of saying, hey, that doesn't work for us, we say, what do we need to take off your plate so that 10 hours a week works? And then as they throttle back up and say, hey, I've got time to work 30 hours a week. We're like, great. How do we put more back on their plate? One of the common things we hear from applicants and new team that have joined us over these last several years has been, gosh, the company I was a part of, the cloud, accounting firm or cloud bookkeeping firm, they just kept putting work and work and work on our plate. And I kept saying, mercy, that's enough. And the goal for growth was bigger than the goal for taking great care of the team. And maybe that was a stated mission, vision, value. Maybe it was inadvertent, but really, to hone in on what you said, honor what the team wants out of their workplace experience, right?
And I think that's critical, to resiliency, which we're talking about, because you want to have institutional knowledge at your company when things get difficult. If we had a whole new team on March 2020, it would have been really challenging. And also, we're talking about a long-term value here and creating a business that's sustainable for you and your vision for it long-term. And just like having clients churn, having team member churn is challenging to deal with, and it destroys value because it stunts your growth or it stunts your maintenance, because when somebody leaves and then you have to train a new person up, that is a distraction. So retention is really, really important for the long-term health of your business.
Amen. Good. So ready to move on to execution?
Let's do it.
So hidden into the
timeline.
That's right. We're staying on target. We want to give you guys all the most value that we can in 35, 45 minutes. So the first pillar, strategy, having a really compelling mission, vision, value. The second pillar of people, attracting and retaining great team to execute on that mission, vision, and values. And so now we move to the third pillar, and that's execution. We take the time to build a compelling mission and vision. Where are we going? We recruit, we attract, and we retain a great team to then execute on where we're going. And execution, how we execute, how we cook the recipe in the kitchen every day, that's key to building a successful, sustainable, repeatable, long-term, valuable, that phrase, Chris, that you use, enterprise value business. If we learned early on, people have different styles. Some people like Outlook for tasks and to-dos. Some people like a notepad as tools like Trello and Asana, and others came into the marketplace. Some of our team liked using those. And so we got halfway through our 13 years. We probably were year 5 or 6, and we realized, oh my goodness, there are so many different ways that people organize their day. And there's so many different ways that people organize notes on how we serve clients, and kind of realize that our value proposition of offering a team approach to cloud bookkeeping, not just one person, not one individual, but a team providing that service. We realized that was really hard to live out because one person had notes on their computer of a way that they served a client. Those notes were structured different than how another team member structured their notes. And so the thing that we learned about execution, and the thing that we want to continue to hone in on in this next few minutes, is that execution, delivering a best-in-class experience to our clients, comes down to process, having things written out, having documentation, using tools consistently across the entire team so that we can execute the plays and the service the same way every day as best that we can.
And I think the important thing there is, you hear it in the way Jeremy described it. It's not about telling your team to just go do something and do it this way and expecting that they're going to get it done. It's about giving them the chance to execute well by having everything documented, by having the right systems, Carbon is a great example, in place for them to use. And so ultimately that really comes back to the leadership team, whether it's you or, several people like we're fortunate to have here at System 6. Is it's on us to put in place the processes, the documentation, the systems, so that our team can execute well. You don't just tell team members, execute. You give them the chance to do it well by having everything documented and having the right systems.
That's right. And that's, I think, early on, as we figured that out, kind of year 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there was a change for us where we said, gosh, it's a lot like our restaurant clients. They hire someone to come work in the kitchen. And if there's like, hey, go cook the pizza. If they don't have, here's the recipe and how much ingredients and here's the order of things, it was going to be a different experience every time. And so we took time to sit down and start writing out processes. We brainstormed over leadership summits. Quarterly, we would take our leadership team away to the mountains or the beach, or sometimes it was not that romantic. We just sat around the office table and like, hey, what is the hiring process? What is the month close process? What is the onboarding or offboarding an employee process? What technology do we spin up? What technology do we turn off? And as we build those processes and realize, hey, there's all these lists, there's all these ways to, we ended up with an amalgam of Google Sheets, Word docs, Excel sheets. And so one of the areas I want to go here with execution is having, as our team grew, what worked for us at 5, 6, 7 employees, we realized wasn't going to work for 10, 15, 20 employees. Like having somebody have notes on their desktop certainly wasn't going to work for the team member that's in Hawaii and Florida to be able to collaborate together. And so one of the tools that has, revolutionized the way we work and changed our industry is a workflow management tool called Carbon. So big plug for the Carbon team. Love you guys. That ability for us to put step 1 through 30 on how we pay a bill or run a payroll or close the month or do a reconciliation, and having it all in one place, assigned to a team member, being able to look and see the status of that piece of work, and are they done with it on time, or maybe do they need help and they're delayed by a few days. That process, taking all of our processes rather and putting it in one central location, huge efficiency gain for us. And it's now giving us the ability to, from an enterprise perspective, handle 150 clients, 175 clients, 200 clients, right? So the tools, and that might be overkill for a firm that's got 2 or 3 team members and 20 or 30 clients. However, look at the mission, vision, value. Where is the vision? We knew we wanted to be a multi-million-dollar company. We knew that in order to get there, that was going to be a lot of team, a lot of clients. And so at some point we said, okay, it's time to invest in some larger, more enterprise grade technology to help us go from here to there. So, on execution, it doesn't have to be as fancy as using a tool like Carbon. It could just be, hey, it's standardized inside of spreadsheets that we all share on Google Sheets or in the cloud, right? So that's kind of processes. Want to talk about rhythms in an operating system for a minute, like how a business functions. Do you meet in person? Do you have a weekly stand-up? Do you have a daily huddle? Early on, we built some weekly meetings and monthly meetings, but some of it, I think, again, it happened organically. And then we came across a book called Traction, which describes the entrepreneurial operating system. And it's basically just a set of rhythms of how things are, how meetings are kept, what cadences those meetings happen in, what kind of things are measured, called KPIs or key performance indexes or indicators rather. And so having a tool, super helpful, and having an operating system for those processes, super helpful. Chris, I know we've talked a lot about processes as we prepared for this call. What are some other ideas that you've seen around creating processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is just to recognize how important it is to have, because ultimately it's part of the value we're delivering to clients, right? Clients are choosing not to hire somebody internally to do this, but they're trusting a team, not just an individual, to take care of their accounting, their bill pay, their payroll, whatever it may be. So it's really like fundamental to the value we're all delivering to our clients that you need to have things documented so that one of your team members goes out sick, someone else can jump right in and take on that work. That's the problem we're solving for our clients, right? If they hired someone internally, that person goes out sick for a week, so they're scrambling. And so if we're going to be better than that option, you really got to have everything documented. Some of the other stuff that, we've systematized here, we've put a process in place with sales. There's a script that I run through every time I get on a call with a client. Even before that, when a client reach out to us, we have a survey that we send them to get some initial information. So I don't have to ask them on the call which accounting software they're using, QBO or Xero. We have an email we send to them that explains how we serve to make sure it's still a good fit. We have quarterly detailed reviews where every account manager goes through and checks a lot of the stuff they've done over the past quarter, quality control. We have profit share, which is, it's not just, hey, this person gets that much and this person gets that much. It's a function of your metrics that quarter, your utilization, the profitability of the clients that you worked on, onboarding and offboarding, Jeremy talked about, hiring we've talked about. So there's really everything we do, we're trying to make it so that it exists on a document on the cloud that other people can get to. So there's no single point of failure risk. If I go out sick, someone else can jump into sales. And the reason for that is that's the value we're delivering to our clients. So you really everything in your business should be written down and have a process. And that's how you execute well.
Right. And we don't do that. You and I talked about this. We don't do that to take away people's personality or to take away the personal relationship that a team member provides to a client, but to standardize the level of service that we offer so that it is consistent. The System 6 brand, the System 6 experience is a high quality one, right? I mean, I think many of us, and we could probably all come up with our own list. I won't say any corporate names, but we know that certain airlines or certain restaurants, like they've developed an experience, and we trust that the team in those organizations are going to provide that level of experience, right? And so that's what we've tried to do in creating processes, which third pillar, you'd think that maybe we should title this section process, but it's really about execution. And to execute well, process, writing it all down.
Yeah. And I think, the point Jeremy makes there about consistent delivery is really important because, again, as we think about resiliency, we think about long-term value of your business, you are going to have team members leave from time to time. Life circumstances change. And you want for the clients that they cover, you want that to feel seamless, the transition, right? You want there to be consistent delivery so that when somebody jumps in and jumps out, the client doesn't feel like the work they're getting has changed drastically, and therefore they might get upset and also churn. So again, process and system is important for long-term health of the business.
Right. Amen. So good place to wrap up, try and land the plane. We've talked a lot about these three pillars: strategy, people, and execution. Building a business, a successful one, building a team, it's bigger than just any one individual. It takes a big vision. It takes a team to execute on that vision. And it takes a lot of processes and consistency to follow through on that day after day, week after week, year after year. And we haven't talked a lot about the word resilience. I think we've, scattered that in, peppered that into the call so far. Resiliency is what, when we got asked to present and share, it was around the idea of resiliency. And when we thought about what builds a resilient business, well, it were those three pillars. Like there's solid strategy, there's a great team of people, and there's consistent execution. And building a resilient business, following through on these three big ideas that we've shared, we believe that will build a resilient business. It'll build a profitable business. And Chris, as you and I have talked about, again, the term I learned from you, long-term enterprise value. Why is resilience important to that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially in our industry, this is really important to talk about because there often is the dynamic at play where a lot of the business lives with the business owner. And, as he or she wants to step back, retire, pass it on, it might not really have that same enduring value that business owner thought they had because so much of it lives with them. And that's why we've been talking about getting it outside of the business owner, into the team, into systems and processes. But yeah, resiliency is important because as an investor, one of the first things I was looking for when I was looking for a business to acquire, especially during COVID, was, are your cash flows consistent? Are they growing? That's resiliency. It shows that, the business has value beyond more than just 1 year because it has demonstrated that over time. So, enterprise value is tied to fundamentally, how enduring is what the business has today, right? How enduring are the customer relationships? How enduring are the team members? That's valuable. And they are enduring, when the business is resilient. If the business is not resilient, you see churn in customers, you see churn in team members. That's going to get a lower multiple, 100%. So as we think about, the three things we talked about today, that creates resiliency and that creates attractive dynamics for investors, which is ultimately, something that a lot of people are talking about in our industry right now, how to exit and move on to the next phase of life. So this is really important for the business that you're going to run while you're running it, but also down the line, if an exit is in your path.
It's great. It's great. Well, this has been an honor. It's been a lot of fun to spend 40 minutes with you, Chris, and go through these three pillars, which again, because we're all leaky buckets, or at least I am, what were those pillars? Strategy, people, and execution. How do we have a great mission, vision, values? How do we attract and retain great team? And how do we execute on that big, hairy mission, vision, values? And I'd leave us all with the thought about the little pigs, right? We all know the story. I've got girls that are 3, 5, and 7. We read a lot of bedtime stories, but the three little pigs, like, are we building our business on a solid foundation? Are we building the house on a solid foundation? Are we taking time to really think through these things and build solid processes that, as Chris, you just shared, create enduring value? I'm so excited and thankful and full of gratitude that the work we've done for 13 years and the team that we've built and the clients that we serve, many, even though we announced it to all of our clients and we've shared it, many of our clients don't really know that much has transitioned because the team continues to do an outstanding job in serving, and System 6 feels and operates the same way it does now as it did then. Yes, Chris is sitting in the seat that I used to sit in, but the business is sustainable and is carried on. And so I'm honored to be on that journey with you, Chris. And I hope for everybody that's listening to this call, this has been helpful. Chris, I know that you wanted to share some wrap up of ways you can be helpful and talk with us.
I want to start with acknowledging Jeremy and all the work that Jeremy and the team at System 6 did over the years to put all these things in place that we just talked about so that, there could be enduring enterprise value and so that there could be a transition. So just an acknowledgement and a thank you for everything you did.
My pleasure.
Over your 13 years. But yeah, so we're going to share a summary of this. We have a blog, system6.com. It'll take us some time, but we will get this up there. And also I want to invite anybody who's listening to reach out to me. My email is chris@system6. I'd love to have a conversation with you about everything we talked about today in more detail. How can you think about mission, vision, values? How can you think about people hiring, retaining, and how can you think about execution in the systems and processes to put in place? I'd also happy to talk with you as you think about transitioning your business, to whomever it might be, whether it's us or somebody else over time, we're just happy to help you think through that process and prepare for it. It's not something that happens overnight. And so reach out, Chris at system6.com. Would love to talk, and would just like to wrap again with a thank you. I'm thankful for the industry we're in. I think there's a lot of momentum for all of us to continue to grow and expand. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you to Michael. And I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season, and please do reach out, and we'll see you soon.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.